Warning. The podcast you are about to listen to contains incoherent rambling read to you by a middle-aged man who believes he is funnier than he actually is. Some listeners may find the amount of sarcasm and dry humor disturbing and traumatizing. Discretion is advised.
On the off chance you've wondered why there was no second episode last month, well, life happened, and summer is not always beaches and margaritas. Truth is, I just haven't had enough quiet time here to record, coupled with a full workload at the moment. I guess if I was motivated enough, I might actually record a few of these at once and then schedule them so I wouldn't have to stress about missing some arbitrary schedule that I've set for myself. Whatever. Quick plug to, I don't even know who makes this. I saw this at the gym, and they have a whole vending machine full of energy drinks, which is, if you combine that with the fact that I can pay now using my phone, that's dangerous. So this is Rainbow Sherbet, and this brand is called Gym Weed. So, I'm going to record this and I'm going to pound this thing. So I don't know what's going to happen. Chances are this is going to suck just like it always does. But anyway, last episode was all memoirs. This episode is all fiction, but not just any fiction. I'm specifically going to focus on short fiction. Now, normally I would say anything under 100 pages, but I think there's a few on here pushing that, only because I enjoyed them enough to include them. And if you're listening to this expecting some deep philosophical review of each one of these, then you must not have ever listened to an episode of mine. We don't do that around here. Not around here, partner. I want to just hit some highlights, and then you will actually go out and read the stupid thing. That's how this works. So the first one I'm going to start off with is a really great family-friendly book by Gabrielle Whitcop. And this is called The Necrophiliac. So she is a French author and released this novella in 1972. And if you're stupid like me, you don't know what novella means. And I had to go look it up. And it's basically a story that is too short to be a book, but still counts as a book when you finish it on Goodreads. And that's the official Merriam-Webster definition. Speaking of Goodreads, I love the write-up about this, which reads in part, like the best writings of Edgar Allan Poe, Whitcop's prose goes far beyond mere Gothic horror to explore the melancholy in the loneliest depths of the human condition, forcing readers to confront their own mortality with an unprecedented intimacy. Now, maybe I'm just not the target audience for this, but I've never really felt the need to be confronted with my own mortality using a story about someone who digs up fresh graves and has sex with the corpse. And hey, if that is actually your thing, I'm not judging. Okay, I'm judging. Go get help. The Necrophiliac follows a diary-type format told from the perspective of Lucien, who is an antique dealer during the day, and his nights are spent fulfilling desires as a necrophiliac. And this book gave off similar vibes to that of Lolita. Both books are so beautifully written, yet the topics are, let's face it, they're forbidden. And I think that's a way to show just how talented an author is. If you can write about something like necrophilia and somebody say, well, the writing's beautiful. I think that brings about a lot of conflict for anyone who reads this book. But the way it was written, it sure was good.
Sex is spoken of in all its forms, except one. Necrophilia isn't tolerated by governments, nor approved by questioning youth. Necrophiliac love, the only sort that is pure, because even amor intellectualis, that great white rose, waits to be paid in return. No counterpart for the necrophiliac in love. The gift that he gives of himself awakens no enthusiasm.
Now, there are some haunting scenes in the book outside of the act of necrophilia itself, such as how Lucien searches for and finds his subjects. He attends funerals and pretends to know the dead only to make it easier for him to find the grave when he returns. how he preserves bodies so he can continue to quote unquote enjoy them was also a part of the story that I was not mentally prepared for. And this guy is aware that necrophilia is wrong, at least in his mind, and it's viewed by society as wrong. However, he does not seem to ever apologize or struggle. His struggle is the torment of his desires and knowing what they are.
Not able to really say to him, I would love your eyes sunken in, your lips silenced, your sex frozen, if only you were dead. Unfortunately, you have the bad taste to be alive.
I was torn after reading this because I didn't like the ending. Go figure. It's always the ending that can crush a great story. And if you're going to read this one, do me a favor, do it in public and hold the book up high enough so any person walking by can at least read the title and judge you. Next, The Yellow Wallpaper, Charlotte Perkins Gilman. She first published this back in 1982, and the story follows a woman who has been diagnosed by her husband, who's a doctor, and she has quote unquote temporary nervous depression, a slight hysterical tendency after the birth of her child. So she's urged to basically rest for the summer, and they are in this old colonial mansion. And since she can't do any type of physical work, they decide the best way for her to heal is to basically stow her away in this mansion's old nursery, which has barred up windows and some crazy scratched up floor. And of course, this really creepy yellow wallpaper. So instead of resting, she pretty much goes insane. And if you want to skip the 60 plus pages of this and go solely on my word, that's pretty much the entirety of the story. The overarching theme of the story is said to be feminism and awareness around mental health. Now, I would hope that as a society, we have moved beyond the point where we realize it's not helpful for someone struggling with mental health to lock them up in a barred up room with creepy wallpaper. But then again, we're also the society that made some girl famous on the internet because she grabbed a microphone and slobbered the words Haktua on it. This one's a quick read, and I think this is actually something that's in the public domain, so you should just be able to Google this and download it pretty easily just about anywhere. But I did find it pretty creepy and terrifying. It has a claustrophobic kind of feeling to me as well. If you're in a reading slump and checking off a book as read helps you get back in the game, then I would recommend starting here. Next up, Scanlines by Todd Kiesling. Chances are you have no idea who Bud Dwyer is. But back in 1987, this guy, who was a politician, held a press conference on television. He was about to be sentenced the following day because he'd been convicted of accepting a bribe. And during this live televised press conference, he shot himself on live TV. And since nothing is sacred on the internet, it really doesn't take much searching to find this footage and see it happen. Scanlines follows a similar plot, but it mixes in a little bit of The Ring, I guess, as well. A group of boys get their hands on a VHS tape of Congressman Benjamin Hardy, who died by suicide on live TV. And this tape becomes known as the quote unquote Duncan tape. And it's supposedly named after the cameraman who died trying to sell it. And anybody who sees this tape is said to be driven to commit suicide themselves. The book itself is short, but I think it packs a lot of punch. It also has some legit hair-raising moments in it. And there aren't many books that have done that for me. Like there was parts in this that I thought, okay, that's legit scary. And if I was going to complain or offer any kind of criticism, and look, I'm going to complain about something. This book is just a little bit too short for me. It clocks in around 83 pages, I think, but I would love to see double that. Since Todd won't ever know that I have a podcast, and I'd be willing to bet he's never going to listen to it. I'm hoping somebody knows him and can tell him that his fan base wants more of his work, but in longer format. I could see this being developed and being a really, truly terrifying story, like even more so than it is currently. Next up, Don't Let Them Get You Down by Philip Fracassi. Quick shout out to Jeff Terry for recommending this one. I want to say I found Jeff's YouTube channel where he was discussing The Painted Bird. And somewhere along the lines, he said, hey, if you like this book, you'll also like Don't Let Them Get You Down. This is the longest book on this list, somewhere around 179, 180 pages. So you might not think it qualifies as short fiction. The best part about that is this is my podcast and I make the rules. So the rules are books less than 180 pages are now considered short. Anyway, the main character of the story, Peter Radcliffe, has lost his wife, and we find him trying to navigate his world where he is trying to resume basically his life, a new life, and one where he is in this dark sea of depression. I really don't know another way to put it. Part of the synopsis reads, a broken love story about self, despair, and the lengths we'll go to find our way back. And if you look at the reviews for this book, a common theme to me stands out. Those who enjoy it can relate to the despair of depression in the book. It's raw and dark, and I think it really touches a level of honesty in terms of depression and sadness. But it's not graphic dark like The Groomer or Cows. At times, it really feels hopeless. Peter comes across at times to me as someone who was on a cruise ship and then thrown off and left at sea. And now he's trying to swim back to the shore or find some other ship. But the reality of being in the sea will never leave. You probably know this author more by Boys in the Valley. And while I like that book too, I just feel like this one, he really stands out. Like his writing comes out even more in this book. Like his talent really places you in these uncomfortable, sad situations where there's an element of fiction to it, but there's an element of nonfiction, and it's a really beautiful combination. I know it's sad, but this is one that I bought on Amazon because I didn't know where else to find the thing. And I'm not going to sell it back or give it away to anybody. This was a 5-star book for me, and I will be keeping my printed copy forever because this one was just a personal favorite. Next on the list, The Aleph by Jorge Borges. And I just know 100% that I screwed up the title and the author. This is what's happening when you take my decaying brain and you combine it with some rainbow sherbet energy drink that is actually titled Gymweed. So all I can say is that it is going to go much faster downhill from here. This book is so short, 28 pages, I think, that even the Kardashians could read it. And is 28 pages even a book? See, this is where I have trouble with some of these things. I don't like marking this as a book on Goodreads because it's 28 pages. To me, that's not a book. That's just a short story. But the way that my brain is wired, I like tracking everything that I've read somewhere. And Goodreads has just been the best place for me to do that. And at the end of the year, I know it'll happen. I can share a screenshot of the total number of books I've read on Facebook, and somebody somewhere, I'll get at least one comment along the lines of, I don't know how you have time to read all those books. And I'll just like the comment rather than reply and ask them, well, send me a screenshot of your screen time for the year. But in the back of my mind, I think of these as shorter stories and novellas, which all they're going to do is just run. They're just going to run my total up. And that's okay. Maybe that is why I like making it up a bit at the start of the year by reading intentionally reading a super lengthy book because I feel like that kind of balances it out. This story is a point in space that contains all other points. Anyone who looks into it can see everything in the universe from every angle simultaneously without distortion, overlapping, or confusion.
All language is a set of symbols whose use among its speakers assumes a shared past. How then can I translate into words the limitless Aleph, which my floundering mind can scarcely encompass?
Now, I've read that he does this with some of his other work, but this book is narrated by a fictionalized version of himself. And the theme here is infinity and time. And I've found so many reviews explaining this book. And I think every review that I've read, like all of them are longer than the book itself. Language cannot describe and it cannot comprehend the Aleph. And I really hope that I'm saying that right, but it's what happens. Hey, you got 4 people that listen. You know what? Maybe I'll just pronounce everything wrong from here on out. You know what? Who cares? Anyway, human memory cannot retain this either. It kind of reminds me of a recent presidential debate that we had here. And I don't want to give away too much about this one. It's like, if it's under 30 pages, you really can't talk too much about it. I would much rather you go in blind or just with this little bit of information and then take a look at some of the reviews out there after you've read it. I think on the surface, this one might come across a little shallow. You're like, 28 pages, whatever. But it really does pack a lot of depth, and it's pretty impressive. And I think it's a very deep read for how short of a work it is. So I would definitely put this on the list. And again, kind of like some of the other ones, you're in a reading slump, go pick this one up. And I think it'll help get the wheels turning again. Next, Hi, I Am a Social Disease. Yeah, that's the title. And I've said over and over again that I would not be discussing books that I didn't like. I don't want to use my time here to bash an author or the hard work that goes into writing a book. And I'm going to bend the rule here just a little bit. So no, I did not like this book. However, just because I didn't like the book doesn't mean it's bad or that the author, Anderson Purdy, is talentless. Okay, it usually means that, but I'm bending the rules here. I caught wind of this mainly from, I think it was the cover being shared online. And it's, for those that haven't seen it, it's a giant man pig thing wearing a suit, top hat, and holding a large sign with the book title painted in black. Probably looks like everybody in Congress right now, except younger. I think they're all over 80. Anyway, it's a creepy and eye-catching cover. I have read enough books that I enjoyed that also carried a lower rating on Goodreads to know that Goodreads is not the end-all be-all of ratings. And let's be honest, some of y'all with Goodreads accounts shouldn't be allowed to have one in the first place. This book clocks in at 101 pages, and it's a collection of short stories by Anderson Prunty. I think I pronounced that wrong, but this is going to blame it on Jim Weed. This is why this podcast will never have a sponsor, because I will be bashing products throughout. Anyway, that's all that Goodreads had to tell me about this thing. It was just a collection of short stories. And I kind of knew that it was a horror genre. So when the book arrived via Amazon, the thing looked like it had gotten wet, and it had some inscription on the inside cover made out to somebody else. I don't know if the author actually wrote that or just some random person in the store, which if you really want to have fun with people, take a pen with you to Barnes & Noble and randomly sign books on behalf of the author. That's terrible, but that would sound really fun. And this is probably something that's going to get me canceled, but I think I may have to start trying that. I have to share this photo of the inside of this thing on the website for those of you that are bored enough to go look. But I struggled with this one. I've read just about every genre out there, especially all types of horror. And I didn't pick up a lot of the horror or the suspense in the stories. Overall, I was left with a feeling of incompleteness. The first story was probably the best, but I was disappointed it was only a short story. Like that one had me pretty hyped up, and I was like, wait a minute, this is the end? Like this should be a whole book just by itself. And his ability it's clear. I think he's a talented guy. Probably my favorite review of this one, it just said, I'm not reading the last 3 stories. I hate this. Come on. I get that you don't like a book, but maybe offer a reason why you didn't like it so people can kind of judge. But, hey, it's whatever. So why did I even include this in a podcast if I didn't like it? I want to know if I'm wrong here or not. I would love someone to go read this, give it an honest shot, and tell me specifically why I was wrong in not enjoying it. We can even devote an episode to it if you'd like. I don't often read books twice, but if the case is strong enough, I'd give this one another try. And finally, A Short Stay in Hell by Stephen Peck. Contrary to what the title says, A Short Stay in Hell is not actually a description of what it's like to watch an episode of The View. This story is fantastic, and it was a favorite for me. It's about a Mormon who dies and is expecting to be reunited with his loved ones in the afterlife. Instead, however, he finds that a God he has never heard of has sent him to a hell that he was not expecting. And this hell is unlike any other that I have read about. Normally, when I hear the word hell, I think a lot of people are like this. Like if I said hell, now what comes to mind? Fire, devils, pitchforks, having to listen to the Red Hot Chili Peppers, flames, heat unlike anything anyone can imagine, eternal torture, typical hell type things. And this hell was so vastly different in so many ways. And it was even really more terrifying, I think. And the hell is said to have been pulled from the Library of Babel and is an infinite library with infinite shelves and infinite books. But don't worry, you aren't stuck in hell forever. There is a way out. And it's simple. All you have to do is find the story of your own life in the library, and you can leave. And while you're in hell, you might find a book with writing, but it might be gibberish to those reading it, leaving them to continually attempt to scan these infinite shelves and floors of books. And people occasionally will bump into each other and talk and spend some amount of time there, and they're all in the same situation. And if these people decide to leave each other in an attempt to explore this library deeper, they may never reunite. And I tell you, this thing left me with like a really, really empty feeling.
I feared the defining point of this hell was its unrelenting uniformity, its lack of variation from type. If there was a heaven at the end of this, it must be filled with great variety, perhaps a multiplicity of intelligent species spread across universes. Yes, heaven would be as full of difference as hell was of sameness.
And there you have it. Another riveting episode of Have You Read This has come to an end. And if you managed to stay awake through all of that crap, give yourself a pat on the back. And now that summer is basically over, the plan is to get back to a regular release schedule here. Yeah, I know. The highlight of your day, knowing that. Until then, keep pretending you're going to get to that TBR pile. Happy reading or, not.
This episode of Have You Read This has been brought to you by absolutely nobody. Literally. Nobody cares enough about this crap to sponsor it. Why are you even still listening at this point?